For strangers, what are your unexplainable and downright creepy stories? One of my best buds from college was a geologist major that ended up becoming a ranger in the southeast US. Haven't spoken in years, as is the case with age, but I remember about 8 to 9 years back he was telling me about an old married couple that he had recently helped out. He had seen them come to the park several days in a row, and found out they were visiting from out west, and they had gotten engaged there decades prior. They had been searching for a spot. They'd taken pics of where he popped the question but were having trouble. After looking at the pics and figuring out roughly where they were trying to get to, he escorted them in his vehicle, then hiked with them to where he thought it would be. They found it, and he left them there and went back to his station at the entrance. He said he got a weird feeling once he got back, and felt like he needed to wait to see them whenever they left. Well, once it came time to lock up at night, he still hadn't seen them leave, so he reported it, left his assistant to wait at the shack at the entrance, and went back to where he left them. He found both of them lying down spooning along the bank of the river. Neither were alive. He called the cops, went through the 9 yards, and went home. The police were able to disclose to him their identities, but weren't sure anything else initially. Later he learned that the wife was terminally ill with cancer, and they had both committed suicide by ingesting some sort of chemical/pill combination medley. They just chose to do it where they had gotten engaged at. My bud wasn't torn up about it. He was obviously sad for about them dying, but said that he thought they hadn't asked for help earlier because they didn't want anyone to think they helped kill them. I have a friend who is a trail ranger. Basically a ranger who can't get you in trouble. He told me about this time he was gathering illegally placed wildlife cameras and knocking down hunting stands, feeders, and blinds with another actual ranger. The other ranger wasn't feeling well, so he said he was going to head back as it's a 1-hour ATV ride. Friend finished up the last one when he heard voices. Keep in mind he's far off the beaten path. He called out and no one replied. As it was getting dark, he started to head back and found that his ATV wouldn't start. He then noticed that the battery was not connected anymore. He reconnected it and started to drive, but it wasn't going fast at all. Less than a half-mile later the whole thing died. He radioed back basically saying, "Hey guys, I need someone to come pick me up." They told him they would, but it would be an hour. He asked if the other guy got back and they said no. He settled down and started a small fire, but before long he heard voices again. It's dark. He's not happy. The voices sound like an argument now. Someone was angry and yelling at someone else who sounded more scared. He called out and asked if anyone needed help. The voices didn't seem to care. He guessed they had to be less than 1,000 feet away. He radioed again and they said they were having trouble finding what path he might be on and haven't left yet. He asked them just to get the other ranger to tell them about where they are because he left with the iPad that had the map. They said he still isn't back. About 3 more minutes go by and he hears the voices start up again. He decides to walk to them, hoping maybe they can stop being drunk assholes and maybe have a map. He walked in their direction, but the voices seemed to be getting further as he got closer. Finally, after 20 minutes he gave up and walked back. He got a radio call and they said the other guy was found passed out covered in vomit and was being taken to the hospital, but he crossed off everywhere they found a stand, so they have a general idea where he is. Then the radio died. Then the voices came back. Bored out of his mind, he decided to listen to what they were arguing about, picking up things like, "Well, it wasn't yours to take, I don't freaking care, you knew better," and so on. His guess was 2 hunters arguing over a kill. Then he heard the one shout something intelligible, then silence, the bang. A gunshot. He doused his fire and hid. After that he heard nothing. Just his breathing for the next half hour until he saw ATV lights. He told the guy picking him up everything and they called back. They had people looking for 3 hours and found nothing. They came back the next day with police and dogs. After about an hour, a shallow grave was found and in it was a long dead man who had clearly been shot in the face. Thing was, it was a skeleton who was there for years. So either the argument he heard just ended with a bang and both parties went home last night, or he heard the murder of someone from years ago. I have so many of these, but I'll share my favorite. I have been a ranger in the USFS for almost 15 years, but this takes place about 3 years after I joined. We were getting calls about a lone wolf with a collar on hanging around campsites. Weird, since wolves aren't known to be in the area, but when you work in the field long enough you start to realize anything is possible. No calls had mentioned violent behavior from the animal, thank God. I departed from the station around noon to check out the places that it had been sighted. Wandered around for about 3 hours, no further calls during that time, until I took a break for water. Sat down, had a snack, drank some water and was getting ready to go again when the thing was about 20 feet out, trotting near the tree line. It seemed friendly and had the collar, so I whistled to it and he came over to me. Getting a closer look, I could see it wasn't a wolf. It was huge, but it was dark and didn't have the right body structure, though I could see why it'd be confusing from a distance. I radioed in and reported that I had the dog with me, but as soon as I said I'd bring it in, the dog ducking took off. Like he was playing, to see how far he could get me to chase him. Typical dog behavior. I went after it, and I swear it was a game of chase for at least 5 minutes as we steadily ran through the forest. Please don't go running through woods unless you know the area like the back of your hand. The dog finally slowed down near a rockbed/creek area, and started pacing around a spot. I drew closer and didn't see anything off at first, then I noticed it. The overgrowth had almost disguised what appeared to be bones. I called it in immediately, and another team was sent to recover the remains. When I went to retrieve the dog, he was just gone. But, honestly, it wasn't a priority at that point. He was friendly enough, and I figured we'd catch up with him later. The bones were identified as a teenage male's, died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He'd been reported missing in the area long before I became a ranger, and there'd been pretty much no hope of finding him. I spoke to his mom on the phone. She called to thank me personally, and she asked how I'd found her son. I mentioned the black dog, then thought I'd said something wrong since there was a pause on her side of the line. After I gave a couple details about the dog, she quietly explained that her son, who struggled with making connections, had sunken into a deep depression after the death of his best friend, the very dog that had led me to him. I think I spent the rest of the day stunned. I continue to be in disbelief, in a way. But I know what happened. Also, throwaway account because my main would give away who the individual in this post is and where it took place. The family still grieves for their son. Not a ranger, but I lived on the outskirts of a national park in a cabin. It was a 4-mile drive from the main road just to get to the property, and we had no plumbing or power. This property was right next to where the park started. To call it the middle of nowhere is an understatement. My roommate at the time was interning with the Park Service, but he is a city kid. Every evening at the dead of night I had been hearing noises in the woods, what I thought was someone walking. But then they'd just stop in particularly overgrown areas of the jungle, so your mind starts to doubt itself. Is it a pig? A cat? Is it just the wind? The cabin didn't have a locking door, and the owners didn't want me to install one, so I began sleeping in my car. Now, this is a huge property, and I'd park my car over an acre away from the cabin and where I was hearing something. I started hearing those footsteps again. I moved out. My roommate, who thought I was bonkers, stayed and still slept there without a locking door. He got robbed, not once, but twice after I moved out. So he finally put up motion-triggered cameras. There was a man with a long rifle who'd hike up to the property, set up in the bushes, and watch us. Small chance I'm the cause of one ranger's story from about a decade or so ago. Was hunting public land with my dad, several miles from anything close to a trail. So the day goes by and not much is going on, weather is crappy and I'm not hearing distant gunshots, so I reckon the deer aren't moving much. I radio to the old man that I'm gonna head back, and we make plans to rendezvous where we had split up that morning. 20 or so minutes later, I was kneeling around the edge of a pond, stripping off all my bulky camo layers. I was just ducking around, putting stuff in my bag while I listened to my earphones. I can't remember if I had taken my blaze orange hat off or not to remove my pullover, but I had all the appropriate gear to denote myself as a hunter in my possession. As I was digging through my bag I thought I heard that faint bass of someone yelling, so I took an earbud out and noticed that crouched on the opposite edge of the pond, there was a lone forest ranger kinda just watching me. I stood up, but didn't wave, and I wasn't sure he had even yelled to me in the first place so I didn't holler anything to him. We just kinda locked eyes for what felt like a few minutes. To be clear, we weren't doing anything illegal, my rifle was unloaded by that point, though slung over my shoulder, obscuring the fact the action was open, and we're following all laws and regulations. I hunched back over to my bag, pulled out my walkie and radioed to my dad, "We've got company." My motives weren't nefarious, I just didn't want my dad to come bumbling down the hill and be surprised by a friendly law enforcement officer. When I looked back up, maybe 15 seconds later, that ranger was gone. I mean flat the duck out gone. So eventually I meet back up with my dad and start to tell him about what happened. Yeah, as deep back in here as we are, he probably thought we were up to no good, and hit the trail when he saw you on a radio. They get ambushed like that. As someone who gets Nervous? Anxious? Around cops, it never occurred to me that I could be causing similar anxiety in them. If you're reading this DNR bro, I'd like to offer you a heartfelt my bad, and keep up the good work. I was in the Gila wilderness, and a convoy of us campers/fishers were making the drive on the dirt road from Mogollon to Snow Lake, when we spotted a forest ranger guy pulled over looking in a ditch. Turns out some idiot tried to make a U-turn, and didn't realize the loose rock makes it hard to stop. They went over the edge and high-centered. We're miles from the nearest official campground and it's early spring and the nighttime gets pretty damn cold. We get a jeep with a winch in position and start to pull the guy out of the ditch. Off a hill comes a white dude in a purple velvet sweatsuit. He's got a walking stick, fanny pack and the purple velvet sweatsuit, that's it. He's a blonde dude and pretty skinny. He comes up to us and he tells us he's German and having a great time. We could not get over the purple velvet suit, it was like a real pimp sweatsuit. The ranger is immediately suspicious, wants to know where's he staying and where he came from. It was around 9 o'clock in the morning and the only way he could have gotten where he came from was to hike for hours. The German guy is a goofy duck and just points off toward the other mountain when asked where he's staying/going. We all think it's funny, but also question how the guy is getting along with no water and no food. The sun is intense above 5,000 feet even if it's only 75 degrees. The German guy refuses water or any other help and just crosses the road, goes off into the woods. The ranger told us he can't really keep the guy from doing that since he seemed okay. He said he'd check a few campsites in that direction later to see if he made it. We get to Snow Lake and commence drinking like fish in order to better catch fish. That evening the ranger pops by to tell us that nobody at any other camp had seen the dude. He radioed around and no other rangers had abandoned camps or missing campers and they surely hadn't seen a German dude in purple pimp sweatsuit. That range rolled off duty the next day and his replacement came by to make sure the other ranger was smoking something we gave him. We assured him it all happened. Never heard another word about the German in the purple pimp sweatsuit, but makes for a good story. Edit, forgot a word. Update, thanks for all the interest. I texted my buddy that was with me that day to reminisce about the German and he reminded me that the purple pimp German looked a lot like the actor Rhys Ifans who played Nigel the Kicker in the Keanu Reeves classic The Replacements. Hope that helps with the mental image. The movie came out like 3 years after the camping trip, but we remember seeing the movie and thinking Nigel looked just like the crazy German. My friend reiterated how absolutely happy the German was.